Okay, let's get this August 24th WDIC meeting together. I am the chair, Henry Granison. Why don't we introduce ourselves? I'm starting with Lisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Holmes. I'm the county administrator.
Okay. Next is Ken Clark.
Ken Clark, Director, Office of Human Rights.
Okay. Kate Shanks, Ruth.
Kate Shanks Booth, Director of Tompkins County Youth Services Department.
Okay. I cannot see everyone at the table, so I want to introduce themselves one by one.
You want to start? Sure. I'm Taylor Spencer, clerk. Veronica Pillar, County Legislator. Gabriella Carr, Associate Director of the Tompkins County Worker Center. My colleague Pete Myers, the director, is also here, but in the restroom and will join us shortly.
Stephanie Heslop, I'm a Tompkins County resident, member of the Worker Center, and a member of Workers United.
Oh, sure. Thank you. My name is Dorothy Lovelace. I'm a Tompkins County resident. I work for Tompkins County the Workforce Development Board, and I'm just here to observe because great work you guys do.
And feel free to turn your chair. Hi, Ann Corman, Tompkins County Legislator.
I'm Cheyenne Osterreich, I'm in the Economics Department at Ithaca College, and I'm part of this Livable Wage working group.
Ian Greer from Cornell's ILR School.
Okay.
And Henry, we also have Dr. Jennifer Maka. She is the newest member of WDIC.
Oh, okay. Welcome, Jennifer. And I see Ruby came into the room. Can you introduce?
Sure. I'm Ruby Pulliam, Commissioner of Human Resources for Tompkins County.
Okay. And are you filling in any other roles?
Oh, yeah, the voluntold role. Okay. And interim, I don't even know if I can call myself interim. I'm helping to facilitate Team Jedi in the absence of a Chief Equity and Diversity Officer.
Okay. And Deanna? Adina?
A little late. I'm Dina Badner, Deputy Commissioner for Department of Social Services.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Do we have any other introductions or announcements? Okay. We have the minutes. Excuse me?
Henry, I just have one quick announcement. This Friday is LGBTQ Pride Day at the New York State Fair. And if anybody would like a free ticket to go to the fair on Friday, whether you're in the LGBTQ family or not, you can get a ticket from either me, they're here at the clerk's office at the legislature, there's some in my mailbox. They're also at our, I think Doug Clark has a few at the Human Rights Office too. And they're available for employees of Tompkins County at the Human Resources Office.
Okay. Do you have them at the office, Ken?
Yes, we do. In fact, several people have picked up tickets already from us.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And last but not least, Rachel, why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd?
Hello, apologies for being late today. I was with a customer. I am Rachel Graham, employee of the county clerk's office and vice chair of WDIC.
Okay, thank you. Now Brittany has prepared some minutes for June 22nd, 2022. Can I see any movers? Kate moves it. Excuse me, who else?
Veronica.
Seconded.
Okay, Veronica seconds it. Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, saying none, why don't we have a roll call vote? Lisa,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Ruby,
Oh, I get to vote as interim facilitator for Jedi? Yes. Yes, I had no vote previously, but okay.
Okay. Anne,
Yes.
Veronica,
Yes.
it looks like Jessica has removed herself.
Did you ask Jennifer? Did you get everybody on the screen?
Oh, Jennifer,
Yes.
okay. I'm also yes, so that passes unanimously. Okay. Discussing items. We don't have many. I know that the the debate came last month. We had a full discussion. There was also some discussion about what happened to the debate. And the debate went offline to the legislature, which the legislature has debated it, and I believe are preparing letters to go to the BIA about it. But it would not be coming back to this committee because of the unique nature of this committee in terms of having employees and non-employees on the committee. So that is it. Any questions about that? Okay, Rachel?
So a letter is being written. It's not done yet, and it'll just be signed by members of the legislature.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Veronica could give an update, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah,
Veronica?
so the letter is done, and some members of the legislature who would like to sign are going to sign it. I think for your information, I'm happy to email it to this committee today. So you can see it. I think, I mean, in theory, a thought could be opening it for others to sign, but it is written as coming from like undersigned legislators. Which will include Anne and me and several others.
Okay. Also under discussion items, face rates is less than 3 months away. It's a conference that's held annually. I'm not sure whether, I think it's always held in North Carolina. Oh no, it's taking place. It's the largest multiracial intergenerational gathering for organizations, educators, creators, and other leaders. Taking place both in person in Phoenix, Arizona, from November 17th to November 19th.
May I, Henry?
Excuse me?
I can give you an update on that from Team Jedi. We have registered six registrations for that conference. Most of them are virtual, and we're setting up sites in HR, probations, the health department, and city clerk's office for virtual attendance. If someone can't take the entire time off, they can come over to HR where the conference room will be set up in the conference room, and they can attend sessions as their schedule allows. And the same
Okay.
thing for probations.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I just want to
opening
add to that too. It takes place every 2 years.
Right. Yeah, last 2 years it was held in North Carolina. The years before that, it was held, I believe, in Detroit, Michigan. I attended winners in North Carolina. It was a very good. Sorry, my dog is barking. She's getting ready to go out for a walk. If anyone wants to attend, I think we have the funding to do so from the WDIC. Why don't you see me after the meeting, and we can work it out with Ruby and get that started. Again, it is a very good conference. It's well worth attending. Okay. I don't think I have any other announcements. Just let me check. Nope. No discussion items. We're going into reports and updates. So I want to go to the county administrator. Any reports or updates, Lisa?
My only update would be to say that we will be having interviews with Chief Equity Diversity Officer candidates tomorrow, in hopes of hiring for that position as soon as possible. We certainly want to wait till we have the right candidate, and hopefully we have them among our pool. So more to come on that, but we're glad that that's proceeding. And then we will be doing phone screenings for deputy county administrator candidates on Friday, and that process is moving along as well. So those are two big important hires for us in county administration, and we're glad, we're pleased with both candidate pools, we'll say that.
I know I'm on the pool for the CDO, but what position are you at in terms of the interview process?
With which one, for Chief
Yes.
Equity Diversity, or the second
Right.
one?
The first one.
Well, tomorrow is we're having interviews with the finalist candidates tomorrow. So that we're having the implicit bias training in the morning, and then the two interviews during the day. So you should have received an update on that from HR today.
Okay. Yes, I did.
Great.
Any questions of Lisa? Okay.
I have a question. So,
Oh,
so we should have gotten an update. Am I on that panel again?
You are on the panel for Deputy County Administrator, and we're not at the finalist stage of that just yet, but we're doing screenings this week. So that process is moving along, and you should be hearing from HR possibly by next week, just when we schedule the finalist interviews.
Okay, but I'm not on the Chief Equity Diversity Officer one. Okay, I was just making sure I shouldn't be looking for that one. Okay, great.
We're trying not to tax too many people too often. Thank you.
And how many, can you say in general, how many people, or were you happy with the number of people that applied for the Chief Equity and Diversity Officer?
Yeah, it would have been nice to have a bigger pool, but we have quality candidates in the pool that we're looking at. So no complaints thus far.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel, aren't you also in the committee?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so two of us are on that CDEO committee tomorrow. Okay, moving past the Office of Human Rights, Reverend Ken Clark, what updates do you have?
OHR has been working with several members of the Human Rights Commission and a number of nonprofits working on developing a civic education project. It's a project that will be focused on the rights and responsibilities of citizenship, the importance of voting, particularly in this season, among other things. This will be a nonpartisan initiative. We have we've had 2 meetings with folks from the Dorothy Cotton Institute, League of Women Voters, the Alliance of Families for Justice, the Ultimate Reentry Program, an initiative called Rejoice to Vote, and FLIC, among others, and some really productive meetings. We will be meeting again next week, and plan for this to be an initiative that certainly will go extend through the election season, but also beyond. And we're looking at organizing a series of monthly programs that'll be focused on these issues. And so that is one of the things that we will be doing on an ongoing basis. And so that's been something that's been sort of a priority item for us.
Do you plan anything to do with Latinx month?
No, I'm not planning to do anything on that next month at this juncture.
Okay. Any plans in the works for activities that we know about?
Oh, say again?
Any plans for the next couple of months that we should know about that you have in the hopper?
Well, we will be doing we plan to have a video screening and discussion around a documentary on Lorraine Hansberry, which we hope to launch sometime in the next month, or at least by October, I would say. I've been working with several folks on that front.
Okay. Do you have anything else, or is that it?
That's all for now.
Okay. Any questions for Reverend Clark? Rachel?
Just one quick one. The civic education project that you're working on, are any of those in person or are they virtual?
These meetings have been virtual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now to the illustrious Kate Shanks Booth.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, just a few things. Staffing, I am pleased to announce that Teresa Albert, who has been with the Youth Services for 33 years, was promoted to our deputy director position in our department. So we're really glad to have her. She's been with us a long time, and it's really exciting. And we have finished up our coordinator of community youth services interviews and made an offer that was accepted by a local candidate. We're being sensitive to that, just to give them about a month to wrap up their other job. We'll make an announcement of who that is, and we're excited to do that around the 19th of September. Last week we had a CSEC training. CSEC 101 was attended between 20 and 25 people. It was in person at the library with the Advocacy Center. CSEC is the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So just a 101 to sort of bring awareness to that, bring everybody into sort of a common space and understanding of what to look for and how to support those youth. And in the next 1 to 2 months, Teresa and I have been in conversations with Heather Murphy, who is a local special education teacher, I believe at Lansing School District. We're going to be having a training around equity, accessibility, and inclusion for youth in mental health is one of those. It's not just physical disabilities, but in youth programming. So we've got those things in the works, and that's what we're doing aside from prepping for budget. So fun times. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions for Lisa, for Kate? Okay. Deanna, why don't you fill us in if there's any updates?
I think our updates are mostly related to training. So we have a number of our staff we've had a few trainings the past month or two. One of them's been on customer service to just keep helping our staff improving their communication with clients, because we have very diverse range of clients, income, race, ethnicity, that sort of thing. So making sure because we've had a lot of new staff come on, a lot of staff turnover this past year. So just making sure everyone's up to speed. There's a leadership series through TC3 that some of our supervisors and staff who are looking to progress in the organization have been taking. And then kind of more specific to WDIC. So for the past, it's been at least 2 years. I think the first one was in 2000, fall 2019 or 20. So we've been continuing to work with Belisa Gonzalez from Ithaca College to do training related to implicit bias and continuing to figure out how to help give our staff tools to counteract that. And so she's given like 3 trainings to our staff so far. And so again, because we're having new staff coming in, I meet with her monthly kind of to consult and talk about what our challenges are and how, what tools we can use. And so we just got her in her calendar for another set of trainings this fall, specifically for our newer staff to kind of bring everybody up to the same level of understanding around implicit bias, and then some of the tools that we're trying to incorporate in working with that. So we're looking forward to that. I'll just toot our horn a little bit. She said we're one of the few organizations that have continued to work on this issue, that a lot of folks she's worked with have do just kind of like a one-off training, and then she never hears from them again. But we keep showing up and trying to figure out our goal is to really figure out how to integrate this more, so it's not just a concept that we talk about once in a while, but that everybody's really familiar with it and part of how we do business, counteracting the implicit bias, how we do business. So we're excited about that.
That's good. And do you have measuring yardsticks of how things are going?
We haven't gotten there. I haven't quite figured out how to do that. We were looking at some data. So what on the child welfare side, what I'll say is OCFS is always looking at disproportionality numbers. So they're always giving us feedback on where we are in that. And I think my memory's not exactly good, but so they kind of rank counties like, not so good to good. I think we're in the mid-range, upper mid-range. I'll have to go back and look at how they score you based on certain numbers. On our eligibility side, OTDA doesn't look at it that closely, and I've tried to look at numbers, but it's been hard with the pandemic. There's been so many changes in our regulations that some of our data that I would normally pull is a little bit skewed, but I'm glad you asked the question, because it's something we were wanting to be able to figure out how to track on the eligibility side too. So I'll go back and revisit that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Rachel?
Sorry. Thanks for that feedback from Belisa too. That was good to hear. I have one question. Who did the customer service training for you guys down there?
I think that was through, I don't have the specific name. I can ask, I can email you and let you know. I think that too was through our, we have a contract. We get funds every year to do training, and we contract through TC3. So it's somebody, I believe it's somebody they
Through TC3 Biz. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I'd like to get maybe a Team Jedi report from either from Ruby or Rachel. Just a brief report of what you guys have been doing. I know you had a meeting the other day. So what you can provide would be nice.
We've had 2 meetings since I was voluntold.
Okay.
So I think that's a big there's progress here. We're working on, again, like we said, the Facing Race registrations for virtual and in-person attendance for those who wish to attend. We have created a flyer for new members. We're trying to recruit new members. Created a flyer for the welcome table at the employee picnic that will occur on August 31st from 2 to 5. So we're inviting everyone to come out, and then while they come, we're making sure Team Jedi is represented and hopefully gather some new members. And while I'm here, I may as well say it's not Team Jedi related, but HR, I'll do it all in one. We have gotten approval from the legislature for the compensation study to award the contract. We're working on the contract there. And as soon as we get the contract finalized, I'll be able to give you some timeframes of when we expect to have it completed. So that's it.
And Rachel, do you have anything else to add to the Team Jedi report?
Nothing more to add, but I did just have a question. Can you say again who the company is that's doing the compensation study?
It's the Burke Group, B-U-R-K-E.
Thank
The
you.
Burke Group is the company that has done several compensation studies in the area. They're doing the city of Ithaca's now. So we expect our study will not take as long because most of the information is somehow already available.
Did they also do Cortland County study too?
They did Cortland, Livingston, Schoharie, however you pronounce that county. So they've done quite a few. And like I said, they're in the city of Ithaca now.
Schuyler too, I think.
Yeah.
Do we have a sense of how long it's going to take to do City of Ithaca's?
They've been working on that since July, so I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure of the scope of their request. All we simply asked for at this time is a market analysis of salaries. We didn't ask for the full compensation study. So ours shouldn't take anywhere from 2 to 4 months at max.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, hearing none, let's move on to compensation another way. The Living Wage Committee, which, if you read your little memo, was created in 2018, was it? And now is doing his first report back. I'll let Veronica and Ann introduce our speakers, and let's do the presentation.
All right, I think I'll turn it over to Gabrielle already introduced. I don't know what title you're using, but important gentleman of the public. And you can take it from there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Myers, the coordinator of the Tompkins County Worker Center, one of the founders back in 2003. We actually started out as the Tompkins County Living Wage Coalition in 2003, so living wages in our bones pretty deeply. And actually, the Worker Center was inspired by what was going on around the country in the this past decade, especially the Fight for 15 movement, But specifically what happened in Seattle, some California towns and cities to raise their local minimum wage to a higher wage than whatever this given state minimum wage was or federal minimum wage. So we had the idea to create a living wage working group that would be kind of representative of various facets of the community, especially employers as well, but also politicians and the like. Basically to determine the economic feasibility of whether creating a mandated minimum wage that's a living wage locally is possible. Just to give you a sense of who was on the working group that met 2 years, was really interrupted by the pandemic in March of 2020. The three main leaders of the group were Anna Kellis, who was the chair of the living wage working group, Sally Klingel, who's the head of the director of labor management relations program in Cornell's Steinman Institute at Cornell University, and then myself as the kind of the organizer of the working group, as well as Cynthia Brock, city council person with the city of Ithaca, Dan Brown, that time was a longtime executive director of the Ryder Center, recently retired. Mandy Ellis was CSEA, one of the statewide organizers. Gary Ferguson, director of the Downtown Ithaca Alliance. Ian Greer, who will be presenting today. I'm doing these alphabetically by last name, by the way. Ian is a senior ILR research associate at Cornell's ILR school. The then director of the county office for the aging, Lisa Holmes, who's with us today as obviously the county administrator. Michael Boysick, the HR director at the time at Green Star Food Co-op. Jason Leifer, the town of Dryden town supervisor. Eric Levine, at the time CEO of Alternatives Fellow Credit Union, that shares in updating the living wage every 2 years. We just did it after 1 year because of extreme inflation. Leslie Dean Claiborne, who was then on the county legislature. Savante Myrick, the mayor of Ithaca. Jan Osterreich, is on the board of the Downtown Ithaca Children's Center, which is actually a living wage employer in an industry that doesn't often pay a living wage. Also, Cheyenne is the chair of the Ithaca College Department of Economics, and I believe an associate professor in that same department. Kathy Schlaughter, and I don't think Kathy is the director of the Human Services Coalition anymore, but she was on the committee. And Jennifer Tavares, the president and CEO of the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce. So it's quite diverse professions-wise working group. To be very clear, the Worker Center went into this and has the agenda, which is not necessarily shared by every member of the working group, to get legislation passed with the Tompkins County Legislature. And we see this as an initial first step to actually create this legislation that would be passed, that every worker in Tompkins County would make a living wage. Thusly, I'm very looking forward to this first entrance into the legislature with this presentation from Cheyenne Osterreich and Ian Greer. Take it away.
Great, thank you, Pete. There's a PowerPoint that will materialize here in a second. Great, thank you. So I'm just gonna, Ian and I are gonna split this up and we'll try to make the presentation relatively brief so we can have time for discussion. We thank all the people that were on the full group, and the research team is listed here. So Ian and I, and with a lot of support from Ian's colleagues at Cornell, we were able to do a fair amount of research. But we will, to be clear, sort of to follow from what Pete said, we're really presenting the research that came out of this project and thinking about the challenges and opportunities of passing an ordinance where the minimum wages would become equal to the livable wages. We did several types of research. Our research group, with the help of Russell Weaver, looked at the demographics of low-wage workers in the county. The full livable wage working committee engaged in information gathering sessions across the 2018. In 2019, the research subgroup began a round of employer interviews in the county. We got some assistance on what's called the benefits cliff simulations, which is trying to identify populations that would be put at risk with respect to their benefits if their wages were to go up. And then in fall of 2021, we wanted to do a second round because obviously COVID had sort of stopped the work of the working group, and also we wanted more feedback from employers. So here is just a quick summary from our 2018 information gathering sessions that are probably not quite that surprising about the possible advantages of having a livable wage, minimum wage. Workers would, and you can see the breakdown. We're not going to go through all of the data points you will see, but not surprisingly, workers know that they would feel empowered, they would feel more committed to their work, they argue they would be able to afford more, and they would allow them to have more control over their time if they didn't have to work as many hours. Disadvantages you can see are more likely to have been mentioned by employers, also not that surprised concern over if there were declines in cuts in jobs, if prices would go up, benefits problems. So these were not findings so much as concerns or interests by people that we talked to during our information gathering session. And we wanted to put in context, as an economist, I know that there is always a big question about raising wages and whether that is going to make firms necessarily cut workers. Is an ongoing question in general, and also that business cycles matter. So, having a conversation that in a peak, rosy, perfect macroeconomic business cycle is very different than when you're deep in the middle of a recession. But here we wanted to show how well Tompkins County is doing in terms of employment relative to, in general, but also mostly relative to other regions across upstate. And I want to point out that in 2016, minimum wages started going up by New York State law. And so in 2016, minimum wages were only $9.60. They're currently $13.20. And as you can see here, we do not see a steep decline in employment in the county. In fact, and I'm not commenting on the other counties and what was going on with them, but in our county, we can see we have been doing quite well. Of course, there's a little dip right there in around 2008 during the financial crisis, but during the period when minimum wages were going up, you can see employment was still quite strong. So we don't have the racing to another county phenomenon. Again, the whole state was facing these improved minimum wages, but our employment is pretty strong.
Can I?
Yes.
What is the end of the slides? And can you just say again, what was the left axis on that graph?
It's like a index to think about. So 1990 is one. So at the very beginning, I should have said that, I'm sorry. So 1990 is the beginning of this time frame. So if it's all like relative to, the line is showing us relative to 1990, how did our employment trends go? So you can see, for example, in Binghamton, they have fallen. So they're around 90% or below 90% in 2018. They interpret it as saying they were lower than 90% of the number of employees in the Binghamton, Tioga, Broome County region. Whereas we are at 100, nearly, you would read it as 1.4 or 140% of number of employees since 1990. Good question. I'm sorry, I should have said that. Okay, that said, the quality of the work matters. And so this is just part of our demographic survey. We're identifying what the demographics of workers who were at or below 2 different levels of livable wages. So in 2021, the livable wage was $15.32. It has subsequently been increased to $16.61 due to recent COVID era inflation. And we can just plainly see that there are really significant racial dimensions to the population that is most likely to earn less than livable wages. So everybody is making minimum wages, which are great, but all workers together in the county are, if they were to be put up with our current livable wage measures, would be around 35 or 39% of workers are earning below, but workers, BIPOC community is much more likely to be, considerably more likely than white workers to be earning below the livable wage.
Everybody knows this.
Yes.
Question for you.
Henry,
Do we have any ideas about this?
so I think, well, as we move into the next slide, we don't have a full analysis of this, but I will say that primarily these are issues related to occupational segregation and opportunities for different workers, the industries that they are most likely to work in as a result of discrimination, implicit bias, prior workforce training, or prior discrimination in previous times. But I think those are some of the general trends for both gender and racial segregation in relatively low wage industries. So here we also just want to say this is again just sort of a demographic survey, and that the way that one would make meaning out of this, especially in our short time here, is the top half of this graph is showing us which sectors are most likely to be employing workers who are earning less than the livable wage. And so it's not a huge surprise, but of course we want to demonstrate it. Accommodation and food services and in retail jobs are the most likely to be making less than minimum wage. That said, our largest employers, so the bottom half of this table, are showing our overall number of people. So our education services, retail, food services, and healthcare, those are large employers. They have lots of workers that are working under the livable wage as well.
What's the demographics for women? Do you know, women versus male?
We do know that. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, Henry, but we can share it with the group after. We just didn't put it in this PowerPoint. But it is similarly overrepresentation. Women are overrepresented in the group of people earning less than the livable wage, but the overall pattern would be such that women of color are much more represented in that group, white women less so, but I can share that data with the group after.
Okay, thanks.
And here I will just wrap up. So those were our sort of demographic analysis based on existing data sets. And then we went about the project of interviewing employers in the county, and we wanted to have a pretty big, we wanted to represent so many of our important employers and also employers that we knew were sort of on the cusp of struggling. So we did our best to get our pool, and we had a lot of help from people on our committee, including Jennifer Taveras and county and public folks, and you can see this is just to demonstrate the representation of the employer interviews. Ian is going to describe the results from the employer interviews, but you can see that they are, everybody is represented. We did 2 studies, as I mentioned, and there's a little bit of change in the sample from the first study to the second study, and we just did a lot of conversations with lots of different types of employers.
Okay, so Probably the biggest and most time-consuming part of this research was to find out what the effects on employers would be. And we found that employer opinions varied and changed over time. A majority of the employers we talked to were in favor of the legislation, but there were also some who were opposed. We tried to find out what the cost would be to employers of having minimum wage, a big minimum wage increase. We told them that we use the Alternatives Federal Credit Union number, and they found it quite difficult to give us numbers. Some of us gave us detailed calculations, but they did it in very different ways. So there's a lot of uncertainty and complexity that goes into finding out the cost of it. So we didn't get real numbers of how much it would cost, but we did get a sense of which employers, for which employers it would cost a lot and which ones are already paying a living wage. The common challenge that many employers talked about, including employers who are in favor of legislation, is wage compression. And the cost of addressing it or making sure that the people making just above living wage also get pay increases. This was an important cost that that most employers talked about.
Ian?
Yeah.
When you say wage compression, I think I know what that is. Is that, if you're starting out people at a higher wage, there's less of a chain or less of a amount gap to hire to other employees. Is that what you're?
Yeah, so compression, so I didn't know this. I assumed that everyone was in favor of equal pay structures, but actually employers thought that their workers want to have lots of progression opportunities, which means unequal pay structures. So it means the entry-level people should be making less than experienced people. They're doing the same job. They're making similar pay. That is called compression. Most employers were worried that employees would not like that.
And I will add, in addition, it is something a lot of collective bargaining units often have steps, and that's what so wage progression would kind of be like, I don't know, concerns about skipping steps or squeezing those steps so that seniority is not valued appropriately and like that. So most of the issues come up at the bottom. So like if somebody comes in, now the bottom wage is higher, maybe you've been paying your second most recent hire only a little bit more than that. And so then does everybody end up at the same? So yeah, what do you do? I mean, so it's not just employers. Union pay structures are often oriented around those steps as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we have another question here.
One of the complaints of a lot of Starbucks workers is that their pay doesn't increase at all, even after they've been there a long time. So I'm wondering, how common this is at the low end of the scale. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't comment on how common it is, but that desire to have your pay represent something about your seniority or your range of responsibilities is a common desire for workers. And so if you've been working in some place for, I don't know, some amount of time, you expect either annual raises or periodic raises to go with your work a little bit and like that. So workers are also interested in those. It's unclear how much workers, we actually have some questions in the New York State Labor Survey that is wrapping up, and we were able to get in some questions in there to get a sense of overall how much do workers actually care. They may set themselves and they want more a higher wage, but are they really that concerned if lower paid workers approach them more quickly if wage rules or structures change? That's unclear.
I think what you're talking about is a super common problem. It's also something that employers fret about because they lose employees or are upset because they're not progressing.
Well, my thinking is that like for a lot of workers who've been at service for a long time, this would like raising the minimum wage would still help them because there is no difference for them. You know what I'm saying?
Was that another hand?
Yeah, I have a question for Ian. I didn't understand your preface to your comments. You said that it was a surprise. Why was it a surprise?
Well, so I thought that most people believe that quality is good and compressed pay structures are more equal, right? But if you look at the reality of these workplaces where there are a lot of people making in the area of, you know, just above minimum wage and just above the living wage figure, you get into a very different kind of moral discussion about what the effect of a minimum wage increase would be.
But don't you work for Cornell?
Yeah.
It's a huge thing in academia. So why does it surprise you? I mean, in academia, it comes up all the time, constantly. Every wage raise, every salary raise in academia accompanies that conversation about what's going to happen to the next step and how you're going to remunerate longevity and how you're going to remunerate. Yeah,
I think
So yes,
we should move on, but I would say that there is a gap between employer concerns about wage compression for low wage workers or arguments about wage compression being a concern and how much do those workers actually care about it. Higher wage people often care a lot more about some of the status related wage definitions. But it didn't come up as one of the top concerns when we were talking to workers, but it came up regularly as a concern when we talked to employers.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get good information from workers, but I think actually many of them care about this too. Employers are not entirely wrong in saying this. What you're saying is right too.
yeah, I just didn't understand. Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along, employer opinions are quite varied and changing. So we have four basic groups of employers. We have those who already pay living wage and are in favor of legislation. We have employers who oppose legislation and for whom a big minimum wage increase would be a major cost for them, put major financial pressures on them. Then we have some in-between groups, some who are in favor of legislation and are really working hard to bring their workers up to living wage, but it's really expensive for them, so it's not an easy thing to figure out. And then we have another group that already pays a living wage or close, but mostly for philosophical reasons, they're opposed to legislation. We noticed between 2019 and 2021, we interviewed most of these employers twice, and quite a few of them changed. Quite a few that for whom it would be a big expense became living wage employers. Some of them became living wage certified employers. There were others, some of these were even opposed to legislation. Some of the opponents of legislation became in favor of legislation. So we see this group who are opposed, who say it's going to be really expensive, shrinking, and the group that is in favor and for whom it would not be a major cost, growing. Next slide. A major topic was employers adapting, and this is important because there's this concern about it being expensive and difficult, but it's not just expensive and difficult. There are also things that employers know that it's coming in many cases, and so they talk about changing their market strategies, accessing new sources of capital, becoming more flexible as organizations, tapping into local networks, as ways that they can make themselves capable of paying a living wage. Also, time matters. A lot of employers said we couldn't do this tomorrow, but we plan to do it in a year or two. It's much more feasible if it's phased in over time. And we also heard a lot about different mindsets of employers, talking about like different strategies and just different attitudes towards it as being important for determining, determining whether they are creative enough to find ways to adapt. Next slide.
Ian, you asked on the previous slide. I was curious, perhaps being a white man blinds me, but what does proximity to white men mean?
Yeah. So there was one employer who was very thoughtful about this and like why they were able to do this and other businesses were not. And they had really good access to capital, just a lot of kind of luck and kind of making this transition. And they said, well, I know a lot of people who have a lot of privilege. They're all white men. They can open doors for me, and this helps me do it. So that's, that is a real thing. Proximity to white men, that was her phrase. So I don't know how much deeper we should go into this. The employers did have kind of different approaches to it. The vast majority were concerned about it. Some of them were kind of dismissive of it. They said, well, we're going to pay everyone a living wage, but we're going to have really kind of equal pay in this organization. That's part of what we believe in. A related topic that many employers talked about was this question, well, if we have legislation, there's some questions I have about special rules for different groups, like maybe it would make a difference if there were exclusions, for example, for new hires in their probation period, or student workers, or different rules for tipped workers. So there's a lot of discussion about that, which I would expect a broader discussion in the county. More employers would come and talk about these possibilities.
I just would say that obviously the educational sector is important in this town, and they, for the most part, are already pretty close to livable wage employers, except for when it comes to students. So that is what opened up conversations. It is obviously not a legal category. You can't pay students something that you don't pay other non-students, but it was definitely something that people brought up as part of the exclusions. Same with tipped workers or people on probation. We're not endorsing it. We're just saying that those were areas of exclusion that people brought up.
Okay, so that is a very quick summary of what we found out from talking to employers. Now I'm going to talk about our benefits cliffs simulations. This is a topic that many people in the social services area brought up. They're worried that if people who are getting means tested benefits and also working get a pay increase, then they won't be eligible for certain benefits and they will also lose their tax credits. So we were trying to figure out how widespread this problem was. It's called benefits cliffs. So we did different simulations for different levels of minimum wage increases. And then we were also interested in which categories of workers are most affected by it, because maybe we could, there could be targeted solutions. So this just kind of displays how benefits cliffs works. If the minimum wage goes up a little bit, there might be a decrease in the value of benefits that would cancel out the value of the pay increase. If it went up more, this decrease in the value of benefits and tax credits would be more than compensated for by an increase in net income. The first case, there is a benefits cliff. The second case, there's not. So this is an extremely complex thing to study, and I'm very grateful for DSS staff helping us figure out how these benefits works, what the rules were. So we looked at SNAP, Medicaid, SSI, Earned Income Tax Credit, TANF, Section 8, and HEAP. And we mustered a lot of data from the American Community Survey and administrative data from the agencies that pay the benefits. It's for upstate New York as a whole because there was not enough data about Tompkins County. So we needed to know about like who's getting the benefits, and we also needed to know how much they were getting. And so we had to muster a lot of data for that, and also compute lots of values, do sophisticated calculations. Next slide. Maru Rodriguez, who's now in Chile, did most of the work. She did a great job. She discovered that probably about 2 to 3% of low-wage workers could potentially fall off of benefits cliffs at most of all of these levels of increase. We were assuming a minimum wage of $11.90, then going up to these 6 different increments. As it went up, there were more households that experienced a wage increase, and the number of households that experienced benefits cliffs was ranged between 20,000 and 23,000 roughly. Next slide.
As a reminder, that's in upstate New York, that's not in the county.
This was upstate as a whole.
And when you say one low wage worker, does that mean one worker whose wage would be increased by?
Yeah, that's what it means.
In all of upstate New York, 20,000 households. You say 20 and 20.
Yeah, could be.
Would experience a benefit.
Could, yeah.
Could potentially.
Because we're not taking into account the possibility that they might reduce their hours to avoid that, or that the rules of the benefits might be tweaked to allow more earned income. So they could.
And that stays in that low percentage of 2%.
Yeah. So if you simulated it up to a very high number, then you would have 0 benefits cliffs because everyone would be making more than the value.
So is that the percentage? So say the roughly 2%, is that the percentage of people whose wages would be increased?
That's the percentage of people whose wages went up who would actually lose income because they experienced benefits cliffs.
Right, but it's not the percentage of all workers. And so it's the percentage of that. Okay.
Yeah, the percentage of people who are basically on benefits who would experience a net income decline if you include their benefit income plus their wage income.
Thank you.
So we're talking about 1 million workers upstate who would whose wages would go up with these minimum wage increases. About 450,000 of those claim at least one benefit, and about 38,000 of them would, under one of these simulations, might experience benefits cliff. So comparing those groups, this helps us to think about like who DSS employers should be thinking about as potentially susceptible. You have to think about their hours and rules of their benefits. So this is households with at least one child under 6 years old. That's an important group to think about. Also households getting Medicaid in Section 8, those are disproportionately affected.
And I would just say that having done some qualitative work on this area, a decline could be, like you get a little bit less in your food stamps, not 0. So it's not like any of the benefits would be zeroed out, but there were declines in, or anticipated declines in one or the other categories.
So it could be a downhill versus a cliff.
Yes, right, for sure. And it, again, it was only 2.3%, but if you disaggregate that by certain populations, obviously, then you would want to know, like Ian said, the value of doing it was we could then, a government. The local government, for example, could think about like, well, that target population, like what could we do to help compensate for what might be a benefit of it that way.
Were you able to like take that 2 to 3% and figure out any demographics for that group?
Oh, yes, so will you go back? So what are the demographics available? Female, race and ethnicity, single people. So
We could present more specific-
women are slightly more affected than, or female-headed households are slightly more likely to have base benefits cliffs than male. Again, Black families with Black heads of family are slightly more susceptible. Yeah, Latino a little bit more. Yeah, I mean the demographic disparities are not as great as the disparities in terms of what benefits. And having a child under 6 is really kind of a big one too. So we were studying this question. We agreed to it. The working group stuck with it. Is living wage legislation feasible? Working group actually as a whole never agreed to an answer to this question. Actually, there was never even kind of a definition that was agreed on how you know if it's feasible or not. We kept doing the research because we think that the facts that we found kind of would help legislators, people who decide, make up their minds about whether you think it's feasible. So one aspect of this, normally when research is commissioned about whether or not to have a minimum wage increase, the main question is about whether jobs will be destroyed and unemployment will go up. This is not an issue here locally because the minimum wage has been going up, and so does employment. We have a very tight labor market. So job destruction is not the issue here. In terms of who would benefit, it's quite a lot of workers. It's 30 to 40% of all workers, depending on what wage level, how you calculate it. It's 65 to 70% of Black workers. So there are major disparities in our labor force that I found quite surprising. I was not expecting them to be that extreme. And if we're going to address them, this is going to be a powerful tool to do so. 2 to 3% of workers whose pay goes up because of living wage might experience benefits cliffs, depending on what they do with their hours, what happens with their benefits, but 97% won't. So it's a small minority. In terms of effects on employers, there is a small number that would experience pretty severe financial consequences, and it's probably worth kind of working with them. And we know, and what they say is they would cut jobs, they would intensify work, they would shift the cost of benefits onto their workers, they would raise prices, they would cut services, and it would eat into their profits or margins. So this is,
Can I ask a question? Was there any sort of pattern among the employers who were reporting they would have a lot of difficulty meeting the living wage requirements? Like, were they similar types of employers, similar sizes of employers, or did it seem to be, kind of mixed self-reported data?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. What are the kinds of employers that would be most severely affected? I mean, we focused on employers that in areas that employ a lot of the wage workers. So, a lot of the organizations we talked to were in those industries. And the group that was most affected, I think it was pretty mixed, large and small. Yeah, different businesses there, and just thinking about exactly who they were. Yeah, they were different industries, different sizes. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to that. So, yeah, please. And that is, how do you distinguish between being affected and feeling affected? And I see a lot of contextual issues here. Like, for instance, the perspective of Cornell that the $8 billion endowment is dedicated, is all dedicated, which turns out not to be true actually for all of it. It's all a matter of interpretation, right? So this question, how is there a way to deal with the question of the subjectivity of facing too much punishment? Or it seems to me there's gotta be a way to crack this question, because it always affects comparable studies that have been done in Ithaca since I've been here, and they all break down around the same issue of pain, of cost, versus the subjectivity of pain around cost. Herbie Edmonds did the most gorgeous study when we first moved to Ithaca in, is it okay to say this? In 19, okay, so when was it exactly? The first time we moved to Ithaca, okay, like early 1990s, when we first moved to Ithaca, Herbie Edmonds did a fabulous study about the 50 families in Ithaca that create, and again, this is, the verbs are weird, you don't want to blame, it's not a blame context, but the 50 families in Ithaca, they created, I believe the statistic was something like 70% of the stresses on the social service system. And then he even figured out a way of recidivism in the jail being figured into the statistic. And it was so dramatic that if the needs of 50 families were fully addressed in wraparound services, including living wage for all members of the family, and the job training that it would require to get them there, and reliable housing, it would have such a dramatic effect. And so I'm thinking, why not do a pilot thing of the most affected families in the county, obviously getting their permission to be involved and show what a living wage does for specific people, including generating stories. Narrative. I just always, yeah.
We need to wrap up the question.
What was that? He wants you to get to the question you wanted to ask, you know, so.
That's comment, it feels like these studies are so constrained by normalcy, you know, so constrained, like that subjectivity isn't built into the study. What does it mean to suffer? What does it mean to be costing too much? And why can't the $8 billion endowment of Cornell be questioned publicly as part of studies like this? What does it mean that your endowment is confirmed to be in certain categories that make it impossible, for instance, to pay for appropriate ventilation of the public schools so that public schools can open every time Cornell reopens when there is a public catastrophe? Those kind of questions are the ones that kill all these good initiatives. I just want to ask. No, it is.
Okay.
It's a legitimate question, Henry. It's what about the context of studies?
It's really important to bring up, but we are running short on time, I think. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I will just say we did run into, I mean, as Ian had said sort of at the beginning, that we are asking employers their impressions. And that is what we were doing. And we did think we could get some data from them so that we could quantify the cost. The issue of the multiple pockets of wealth in the county aside, unfortunately, but on this process, and we learned that it was just quite difficult to get folks to quantify the cost, and partially due to time and whatnot. But I think in general, perceptions from workers, perceptions from employers are in fact the thing that, that is how people vote. It is how they do lots of things. And uncertainty in economics is based on one's perceptions. So I think one of the things that we got out of our study that I think is the most valuable is that there are some practical things that employers talked about that they did when they were adjusted to minimum wage increases. And those things could be workshops that could help inform the impressions that other firms have when they think about, like, I just don't know, it seems like it would be difficult, but we could do actual work around like solidifying those into like, okay, so you are worried about this thing. Well, these couple firms over here that are kind of similar to you, this is things that they did when they were worried about that. And so I think we came out of the study with some practical suggestions in that regard, and that the firms offered.
I want to say that I agree with you that the inequalities in this community are unacceptable, meaning in terms of it's the most income unequal metro area, state New York. It's above average even for the United States. Cornell's endowment is an extreme case of this inequality. And I also agree with you that perceptions and strategies kind of, I think this is actually, we're much better at capturing that in the study than we were about getting them to cost it out, because it's actually very difficult to cost it out for reasons that we'll talk about in the report.
Can you unshare your screen?
Unshare the screen.
Okay, thank you. That's much better. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I have a couple of procedural questions. Where's the working group at now?
Well, the working group hasn't met for, God, at least 18 months. Ian, Cheyenne, you might have the best memory of this.
So yeah, something around that.
I mean, I will say from the worker center perspective, I mean, it's like we just like to move forward with this because we want to move forward with it regardless of where the working group is my thought. But, I don't know what the researchers would think about that. As we're not going to get uniformity of agreement on the work without that.
Well, you can't get the working group together?
We can get them together, we're not going to get uniformity of opinion on that. Moving the legislation forward.
Henry, what would be your purpose? What are you hoping to get?
Well, since we sent it out to the working group, I assume we'd get a report back from the working group about their results, their findings and everything else, and consider that. And not a part of the working group.
I would say that any results or findings that the working group ever created came out of the research subgroup. I do know that we should try to convene the group at least one more time for us to share with the other members of the working group. But the group was basically chaired with the support of the event, but chaired by a member of the Tompkins County Legislature. So in some sense yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of people who were on the group together, but sort of in absence of a connection to the county, we are just sort of informing ourselves of things we've been doing in the last 3 years. And so I suppose we might be interested in continuing to be a group if the county was interested in more information. But I think that's the sort of little bit of a conundrum as the group itself might be in.
So can I address that? I think we should produce a full report. We should talk about it with the working group. I don't know how long that will take, and I don't want that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I would be concerned that if it took a long time, it might hold things up with political decision making. This is a political decision by elected people, and it's up to you to decide when you have the facts you need to decide to move forward. I mean, we have been. I'm tempted to say I was tempted when I started writing the slides to say that these are preliminary findings, but we have been working on it since 2018. We've done these estimates over and over again, different ways. We've looked so many times at the qualitative data on employers. I mean, the results are not going to change that much when we write the full report. They'll change a little bit, but I think the basic messages from the slideshow, from the short report we submitted to you, will be quite similar.
Henry, can I say something?
Sure, Ann.
Yeah, I'm thinking part of the reason when my colleague Veronica brought this up, I thought this was good timing because we are already seeing issues around the dynamics of let's say maybe power, where workers have more power in respect of they're more in demand. There's more scarcity for employers to be able to get employees, and what I've heard around the country is that employers are already paying a lot more in especially the lower wage jobs, that they're already paying more to employ people. So I really think this is a good time to go ahead and act on it. I think we're going to have less pushback from the community and less maybe effects because they're already paying more. So it might not be as a big a stretch, financial stretch or hardship on employers. Myself, I'd like to see how fast we can push this forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm aware that a couple of years ago that Marriott downtown was looking for employees couldn't find any, and they raised their wages surprisingly, and then they found people. And so under that logic, yeah, I mean, basically there all been pressures on employers to raise wages to continue to hire people. And we keep putting in contracts, we're trying to put in contracts that they have to hire living wage people. But I just want to know about, I mean, we sent out this working group. I want to get something back, something concrete. And so then we can move from there, as opposed to just saying, well, there's a feasibility study that would do that. But again, like the food study, where we actually got something back. And so I'd like to get something back. And I know the two legislators who are on the committee are gone, but I believe that Anna was head of PDAC then. Was that?
Right. Or, yeah, one of those groups, yeah. But these are, as my recollection is, these are the questions that we wanted answered back then. Here's our answers. And if it could be, if you were saying about a more formal report, these are the answers the working group was assembled. And here we have the actual answers, right?
Okay.
We can draft, of course, draft it into a more detailed document if that's what we're talking about.
I wanted to ask in response to what you said, Janet, earlier, is given the changeover in legislators, is there anything the county needs to do to like facilitate you all reuniting as a working group, or can you just do that? I would produce a report and send it to us, and
I think
in the meantime.
Yes. No, I really only bring that up because it was like in a kind of informal way commissioned by people from the county, but it wasn't like the county legislature itself was commissioning it. It was sort of a participant, a group that was formed by some people who were on the county. But in terms of, I hear that you will accept the report. It's basically the like, is there somebody on the committee, on the county who wants the report? And it sounds like there are, so we have some reason to make it, is really
Yeah, I mean, as I recall it, there was some protests, and it was sent to committee, and then the committee started a working group to assign it to be looked at and be researched. And so the expectation was that would come back to the committee after they'd done its job. And so that's what I was expecting. A report done by the working group back to committee, so the committee could look at it, have a presentation, and then decide what to do with the request and the report.
So I think that's what's gonna happen, right?
But that sounds like that would slow things down quite a bit to try and reconvene the commission or the working group. And again, remembering back when it was that 2018 or so, that it was different times where I think we really felt when we talked about it was that we needed to get community support and community input and answer some of these questions. And I think these are different times. I'd like to consider, go ahead and maybe try and get the working group back together. But I think, could we accept this report directly to some committee, whether it's WDIC or PDEC, and figure out what would be the steps and through working with the state or whatever we need to do to get permission to change the minimum wage for Tompkins County. I would like to see how to fast track it, is what I'm saying.
Well, we know WDIC is not a full committee because we'd have to go through budget. And Peak would not have to go through budget, but we could go through those two committees and try to get it done, and we could talk about it. Deborah.
All right, so maybe me, you, and figure out what other legislators, would be involved in talking about this. Because I, as chair of the Planning Development and Economic Quality Committee, if that can go through that, if that were, because I believe the steps is, and we'd have to ask the state for permission to do this. So we could look at that, and I'd be willing to help try and see if we can get through my committee.
And to be clear, I'd love a more formal report from the working group, but I don't think we should wait for that to move this forward.
Right. Right, I don't think that precludes that, right.
I would also say that the working group membership has, all of our lives have varied. Ian and our lives are pretty much the same as they were, but some people are now county administrator or their lives are different.
Or state assembly clerk.
Town or they're in Albany or whatever. So in terms of the constitution of that particular working group, it would be a kind of random sample. We do want to present it to people who are interested, particularly Jennifer Tavares. We do want to be in conversation with her about the findings. But as the research group, we just did what the group told us to do, and we did actually give a preliminary report on Zoom in the middle of COVID. But so just in terms of the viability of the group itself, its composition will be much diminished from its original group. And so Ian and I can work with our colleagues to, put this into a fuller document with more details. But are happy to come back if anybody wants to talk to us again or find more details. But it's nice to know that people are interested in the topic and want to take it forward.
Sure. Why don't we proceed that way? Why don't we, myself and the head of budget and Lisa perhaps, can work on the logistics of getting it to another committee and everything else, while the working group works on some findings for its research as quickly as possible. And then we'll have you present at another committee soon after you get your research together. And we set up other committees to look at your research. I can't hear that.
So Henry, you're saying we could talk, so I believe the process is we'd have to pass a local law, right? That gets approved by the state. Well, I'm just thinking about the process for the county.
Yeah. I do not know the process, but I assume we would have to do the local law passed by
Anybody here
the.
know?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the process? Let's just talk about that and how to get there.
You have to pass a local law, and then the state assembly has to pass something or.
Enabling legislation.
Do that, yeah.
So allow us to do that, right?
I don't know which committee in our legislature this fits in or how much flexibility, like, should we send it from here to budget?
I don't know if budget is the right, I don't know. I mean,
Well,
it's the budget of the county, it's the budget committee is the budget of the county, so I don't know.
Yeah, it depends. I know that in your presentation, you talked about that the county would help with employees in terms of the budget, in terms of their budgets and everything else. If you're asking the county to put any money to this, you would have to go through budget. If you're talking about just passing a law, just saying that, okay, you're required to pay this amount of time, I don't think, and no budget fundings would be coming out of the budget, then I don't think that you would need to go to budget, but you would need to go to a committee that's whether it's PDAC or maybe government operations, I'm not sure. We would need to talk about that, Ann.
Okay.
Lisa.
So we'll have to have a discussion on that, Lisa, to see.
Yeah, also, I'm not comfortable because you talked about Jennifer Tavares, who I assume is against this feasibility study. And so I'd like to hear from other members of the working group too, to make sure that we have a good sense of everybody's opinion.
Hey, sorry, Henry, can I get a time check? Are we trying to end on time or not?
Well, we were trying to end on time, but we can go over like 5 more minutes.
Thanks.
So I just wanted to point out procedurally for the legislature, if it is a local law, it can go to, I believe it would have to go to GO for the blessing of the local law, government operations. But as far as which committee would oversee the work, I guess, of the living wage, I'm guessing it would either be, I'm assuming it would be HHS, because they oversee the Human Services Coalition type thing. So I believe it would be HHS.
Okay.
Why would the Human Services Coalition?
So I know it was mentioned with like the research end of it. It could. Yeah. And Human Services Agencies, where like, so I'm kind of encompassing of that, I think. I could be wrong and I can check with Kathy, but that's how I view it.
Yeah, because when this is originally going to come back, I thought it was going to come back to HHS, but then it went out of peak. And so, you know, and I know also Leslie also was involved with it too. And so that's why it came out of, that's why WDIC has a role in it. But.
All right, so it sounds like go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, I'd be willing to look into it and get back to the committee.
Okay, Thank you,
Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you.
I don't think it's, I just want to put out there that we weren't casting any generalizations about what Jennifer Sparrows might think or not think about it. It's just that we have not actually presented, what we presented to you all has just, by practically speaking, has not been presented to our working group. So we haven't gone through the discussion, and that's partially because we don't exactly have a working group anymore, but key constituents on it, we have not had that, we have not had an opportunity to do that. So I just want to put for the record that we're not speaking for the viewpoints of other people, just commenting that we haven't had this conversation.
Okay, I would like you to, I'd like you to at least attempt to get the working group together and to have this conversation with them before you try to get a feasibility study, before we try to get a local law, to basically have the working group report back to us in its entirety with the report.
So I don't think the committee is in agreement on that, and I don't know procedurally what we should do to make a decision coming out of this meeting. Like, I don't want to wait for the report.
What do you mean they're not in agreement? I mean, if they haven't met for 18 months, how do you know they're not in agreement?
So we, this committee that is meeting right now, WDIC, I think are not in agreement on whether to sit back and not touch this until we hear their report, or to do things like for Lisa to look into what committee a local law would go through, and maybe us to look at talking to the state, writing it. I'm sure there's many other things to discuss.
Yeah, I'm not sure this group has jurisdiction over the working group.
Well,
So-
right, the working group is independent, was a totally independent, it's not something that was really commissioned by the county legislature. That it was purposely, if I remember back in 2018, it was purposely an independent group. So it was not something that was reporting periodically back to us, to the county in any way. It was a totally independent group. So it wasn't a subcommittee, it wasn't tasked, we weren't tasking them with anything. It was just something that came out independently in the community about the time we were having questions. So it's, I don't see it as.
Okay, I thought that Anna put it out of peak.
No, there was a discussion at the time about it, and the community organization came out, am I correct? This was a totally independent, organic, that was purposely, and then I can't remember the reasons why, but it was purposely wanted to be not associated with government, so, it was independent.
And I will say, we actually did a big rally and went to the HHS committee, just as an FYI.
Okay, I thought
I
so.
think he means the worker center.
Yes, the Tompkins County
Yeah.
Workers Center.
Yeah.
We are not
Yeah.
speaking for the workers group in terms of our desire to move this forward into legislation. We believe as the Tompkins County Workers Center, this is our mission, and this needs to happen now.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Good.
And I'm not speaking for the working group. I'm speaking as one of the directors of the Tompkins County Workers Center, and our mission as a nonprofit, a mutual aid organization representing the people that you all are representing.
So I don't see myself, from someone that was on that committee that you're talking about. I don't know if it's called PDAC or PEAK at the time, but I was on either iteration. I was on that committee. I know that it was not a prerequisite for us to do anything.
Okay, well then this working group can just report to any, I guess in theory, can report to any committee of the legislature and have that committee look at it.
Or we can just move simultaneously. We will just work to make a longer Word document out of it, and we will talk to a few people that were on that group, and you guys can also just do what you want to do.
Okay, why don't we Lisa and Ann, why don't we get together and talk about it, talk about the procedure, and then move forward.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, any other questions of the group or anybody else?
I wanted to thank everybody for coming here, and having this, presenting this data to us. And my recollection is it answered our questions, that we had, going back to 2019, answered every question that we had.
Yeah.
You didn't have to report to us, but those were questions that came up at that time. And so thank you. Is there anything else anybody want to say?
I want to thank you for inviting us to come and present our research. I really enjoyed it, and in academia, it's so rare that you get to produce knowledge in a way that actually might help thousands of people improve their quality of life.
I agree. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And we will get back to you about the procedural way that we will handle this, and hopefully as soon as possible.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, having no other things before this board, I have a motion to adjourn. I have a motion, I have someone move it, get someone second it, and I assume there's no debate. Raise hands.
No debate.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.